name is Jackie Anderson. I'm an assistant dean at the University of St. Thomas, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to our weekly online learning series. Today's session is the value of saying no, so you can say yes to what is most important with Leo Hopf. We hope participating in this weekly online learning series is giving you some great professional development, as well as some sort of measure of normal in your workday. As a matter of fact, executive education has flipped all of our courses. All our courses are being held virtually in the near term. So if you're looking for more comprehensive development, take a look at our website. Next week, we have the Certified Professional Project Managers course launching. And then on May 11th, Data-Driven Marketing kicks off. But regardless, if you sign up for one of our non-degree courses or not, we hope to see you every week at the online learning series. And let me give you a preview of what's coming up. On Thursday, May 7th, we have the session Leading Virtually Without Virtually Leading, how leaders can use this time to transform their leadership practices with Allison Smith. Allison actually teaches in our executive MBA program and is an executive coach in our St. Thomas executive program in executive education. On Wednesday, May 13th, Kim Martinez, who is the Chief Marketing Officer here at St. Thomas, is leading a session titled Marketing During a Pandemic. Now, Kim brings her experience both from education and her time at General Mills. It's going to prove to be a very fascinating session. And then finally, on Wednesday, May 20th, we have a session on mindfulness with Dawn Bizarco. Dawn was the Chief Clinical Officer at Optum and the founder of Moment Health, which is focused on scaling mindfulness and resiliency solutions for individuals and teams. We have a great lineup coming up as the weeks go on. But let's get to today. We have a great session. Our plan for today is like they usually are. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Leo Hopf, and he will spend the time laying kind of the groundwork around the topic of the value of saying no in order to say yes to what's most important. Now, you can use the chat feature at any time during the presentation, and we'll take questions, as well as we have some questions for the end as well. We'll wrap up no later than 8:55, so you have a few minutes to get ready for your next meeting. And if you have any difficulty at all, please know the session is being recorded, and we will email out that link to you after the session. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Leo Hopf. Leo is an adjunct faculty here at the University of St. Thomas, and he actually leads our open enrollment decision-making and execution course, as well as teaching in the St. Thomas Executive Program. He also lectures on strategy and decision-making across the globe, everywhere from Copenhagen Business School to Stanford to St. Thomas. Leo is the author of a book, Rethink, Reinvent, and Reposition, 12 Strategies to Renew Your Business and Boost Your Bottom Line. Formerly, Leo was actually the managing director at Strategic Decisions Group and is currently a consultant to CEOs and their leadership teams. He has an MBA with highest distinction from the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth and a Bachelor of Science degree in Chemical and Metallurgical Engineering from the University of Minnesota. I can promise you a fascinating session. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend and colleague, Leo Hopf.
Thank you, Jackie. Today's session's the value of saying no, which for many of you may seem a bit odd because we don't usually think of no as being valuable. Yes is what we're supposed to say. Your boss asks for something, you should say yes. And it seems like it's the polite thing to do. I was raised in Minneapolis, grew up there, and I like being polite, and isn't it polite to say yes? But it turns out saying no is absolutely critical and fundamental to the success of your organization and to your success personally in terms of your own career. Let's bring up a few slides here. Start with a quote. The art of leadership is saying no, not saying yes. It's very easy to say yes because everyone wants you to. But if you're going to say no, on what basis would you say no? What is your principled reason for saying no? How do you do it? And if you say no, how do you get the work delegated so someone else gets it and gets it done? So how do you think about not only the saying of no, but making sure the whole system works when you personally say no? We'll discuss how to do that, why to do that, and I'll give you some tools for doing that. And the fundamental issue is when you say no, and that's no with a period, Not no with a question mark, not no, but maybe you can talk me into it. But a principled no, that's not something I'm going to add on to my plate. The reason you do that is not because you're not a team player. It's not because you're lazy. It's because by saying no to low value tasks, you can say yes with an exclamation point to high value tasks. You can't give a strong yes unless you can give solid no's. If you can't give solid no's, what happens? More and more things get added to your plate. And it's like you're spreading the peanut butter on your sandwich, but just getting spread too thin. There's no way you can do excellent on 50 things. But if you said no and really focused on the 4 that matter, you could get an A+ on those 4. And in terms of how people perceive you, in terms of the value you add, getting that A+ is much more critical than getting B's and B+ across the board. But you can't get A+ unless you really give a strong yes. And you can't give a strong yes unless you can give a solid no. Love this quote by Warren Buffett. The difference between successful people and really successful people is that really successful people say no to almost everything. So the teeny tiny amount that's left, the small sliver of things that are left, are the high value things that truly matter. And the things you said no to are the things that 3 months down the line, you'll have forgotten about because they really weren't that important in the first place. And if you think about time, people have way too much on their plates. This is not news to you. No one has had free time since the 90s. Everyone is busy. That's not the issue. But for most organizations, if you think about it, people talk about, well, our organization's constrained. Well, what are you constrained by? Most people think it's capital money, and it's not. I've worked for 200 different organizations. I haven't found one, not one, that was capital constrained. The first constraint they hit is management time and attention. They're going to run out of that far sooner than they run out of money. It's their ability to run the business, to deal with the opportunities that present. It's that time and attention that's the most precious resource. But that time and attention, even though it's our most precious resource, think of how we squander it. How many meetings do you go to that have no purpose? You shouldn't be there. They're not organized. You leave and no progress has been made. Okay? We squander time left, right, and center. I want you to think about this. Everyone's busy, but not all the things you're busy about are the things that matter. So look at that blue box on the bottom. I want you to think about all the things you did in the past year. You went to meetings, you did some analysis, you gave presentations, all those things you did. So just keep that in mind. Think of all those things. And now I want you to ask this question, and I'm going to give you 10 seconds to think about it. What percentage of your time over the past year was spent on things which could have been delegated or which turned out not to matter? Think about that. I want a percentage. I want you to individually think of it for you personally. What's your percentage? What percentage of your time was spent on things that could have been delegated or turned out not to matter? I'll give you 10 seconds to think. Now think of your personal number. When I do this with groups, the answer is very consistent, 30 to 40%. It's a day and a half to 2 days a week that are spent on things that could have been delegated to someone at a lower level, getting paid less money at a cheaper level, or turned out not to matter. And you did them, but at the end, why? It just didn't move the needle at all. And it's not enough to be busy. The question is, what are you busy about? And here's the interesting thing. On Thursday, you get paid the same amount as you do on Tuesday. And on Tuesday, you get paid the same amount as you got on Monday. So every day you get paid the same. But depending on the task you choose, you may add 10 times the value on Tuesday that you add on Thursday. You may add 100 times the value on Monday that you do on Tuesday. The amount of value you add depends on the tasks you choose to do and how you fill your time. So I want you to think about this. People perceive your value by the tasks they see you do. If they see you doing high-level tasks, they assume you're a high-level person. If they see you doing low-level tasks, they'll think, geez, I'm surprised. I thought you was beyond that. So I want you to think about this. Think about percentage of the left-hand column, the percent of time you spend on tasks, adds up to 100%. In the middle is the annual pay of someone who could do that task. So you can have a range of tasks. Some of the, let's say you make, I'm just gonna toss out a number, $120,000 a year. Okay, that's how much you get paid. Divide that by the number of weeks. That's what your weekly paycheck is. Paid the same every week. But now some of the tasks that you could do could be done by a $50,000 a year person. Some of the tasks that you could do could be done by a $100,000 a year person. Some by a $200,000, some by a $300,000. Okay? So think about that. The tasks that you do, some of the tasks could be done by a cheaper person. Okay? Now, what if you spend 50% of your time on tasks that a $100,000 person could do, which is a little bit below you, and 50% of your time on tasks that a $200,000 person should be able to do? If I take 50 times 100, that gives me 50,000 value. 50 times 200 gives me 100. If I add that up, I get $150,000 of value. So you're adding $150,000 of value to the organization. You're getting paid 120. Future's great. You're adding more value than you're getting paid. But look on the right-hand side. What if it's hard for you to say no? And in fact, you don't feel like you're above doing the small tasks. And so you say yes to some low value tasks because you want to be a team player. You don't want to be rude. You don't want to be impolite. And you spend 20% of your time on tasks a $50,000 person could do, 60% of your time spent on a $100,000 task, and 20 spent on 200,000. So 20 times 50 is $10,000 value added. 60 times 100, 60,000. 20 times 200, 40,000. You add that up, you get $110,000. So by trying to be a good player and trying to always say yes, you've said yes to some low value tasks. Because of that, you've added $110,000 of value to your organization, but you got paid 120. You're adding less value than your cost, and your future's in peril. So by watching the tasks you do, people will think about and use that to decide how much value you're adding. And different tasks have different value. Another way of describing this slide is when I'm making photocopies, I'm a $12 an hour guy because you can pay someone $12 an hour to make photocopies. I can't make photocopies any better than that person. In fact, I'm probably way worse. So at best, I'm a $12 an hour person when I make photocopies. Okay? And when people see you making photocopies, geez, Leo, I thought you were supposed to be preparing for that big meeting with the board. It sends the wrong signal. They see me doing a low value task, and that starts to reduce their view of my value. Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, to a meeting member, you haven't said anything. Why are you even here? That's the point. If people see you doing low value tasks, they'll see you as a low value person. Don't be in a meeting unless there's a purpose for it, either to make a decision or to get people up to speed. In most cases, an email will suffice. I learned this lesson, unfortunately, a very hard way. I'm a management consultant, and my best client for 2 years in a row, I had worked for 19 of the officers in the company. I had worked for every single member on the strategic leadership team, including the CEO. We had done strategy projects across the organization. They'd all gone very well. And I had expected this would be my best client for the next 2 to 3 years. Okay? I've really never had a client that felt to me that it was that good of a relationship. But then I got a request, and the request came from the head of IS. And the person said, Leo, I've got a really contentious investment I have to talk to the strategic leadership team about. They have to approve it. I want to take responsibility. I want to present it to them, but it may blow up. And if it does blow up, I'd feel better if you were in the room because they all know you, they all trust you. I know you could bail things out. I said, well, geez, if I'm just sitting in the room and not leading the effort, it doesn't seem like I'm adding that much value. I said, Leo, as a personal favor to me, would you do it? So as a personal favor, I said, yes, okay, I'll do it. I did 4 meetings, hour long with the strategic leadership team, all of whom I had worked for, all of whom had seen me work, all of whom had personal firsthand experience. But in those 4 meetings, I was just sitting on the side of the room and not the one leading the session, not the one adding value. And after those 4 meetings, which I did as a personal favor, I never got hired again, not once. They had been my biggest client. Things were going well. But once they saw me in a low value situation, their view, even though they had personal experience, became Leo as a low value player. Okay? It's a real thing. People judge your value based on the tasks they see you do. Now, the world has changed, as you know, with COVID. Our COVID hair is starting to get longer and longer, which is kind of annoying. But it used to be a lot of your interaction with your boss and your colleagues was management by walking around. It was the informal meetings, even maybe walking to a meeting, chatting in a hallway. Well, that informal chatting is almost all gone now. Everything is Zoom meetings. And by the way, I got to compliment Zoom. They were able to quintuple their performance in like 2 days, which is kind of impressive. But now your day is spent with meeting after meeting after meeting, and it's clicking the Zoom link, having the meeting, finish the meeting, clicking the next Zoom link. And the way you are perceived is going to be different at the end of this year. How will this enforced switch to formal versus informal affect how you are judged and graded? I'm going to contend that at the end of the year, because people haven't had that day-to-day contact with you, they're going to look at your list of projects and how big of an impact did those projects have? How much did they move the needle? And I think this year more than others, they're going to look at what you actually did rather than how you felt around the office, because we just don't get that how you feel type of activity this year with COVID.
Hey, Leo, I'm going to ask a quick question.
Yes, Jackie, ask.
Leo, the problem with my employer is they assume after you've accomplished some large initiatives on the strategic plan, then you are no longer needed and your entire role can now be handled by a lower paying employee. They are ignorant as to your value, even after you try and educate them with the value data. What do I do?
Well, thanks, Jackie. And on the one hand, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. Once you make the strategic plan, handing it off to somebody else to actually execute it is typically the right thing to do. So one, the way you described it didn't sound like a failure. It kind of sounded like a success. But the question is, did people really see the value and understand the value you added in coming up with that strategic plan? That really was your value added. Your value added was not executing it. That was passed down to others. So the question I would have for you is, how solidly did you present and show your understanding and show why the plan you selected was correct? And how well did you hand off that plan? Oftentimes you get a great plan and then the handoff gets fumbled, and what actually gets executed is totally different than that plan. And so I'd think about what was the process and what were the series of conversations you had with the executives that led to that. That's how they should be judging your value, as well as how did you connect with the people who will be executing, whether any balls dropped or was that connection done well. If you can do those things well, I would argue on that particular project, you gave a lot of value and you were seen as doing it. Now, all you can do is what you can do. They may not perceive the value. They may be jerks. They may not see all the wonderful things you did. Fine, do it again. And then do it again, and then do it again. If you have a series of 2, 3, 4 things, each one of which was done professionally, was a thing that mattered, was done at a high level, eventually they're going to come around. And if people don't come around, if they don't see your value, even though you've had value after value after value on things that mattered, then you have to wonder, geez, is the problem with my boss is not perceiving, is a problem with my fit in the organization? Will they ever perceive it? You know, it's hard to do really good, high quality professional work. If you do that and never get any respect and thanks for it, that makes it a really tough place to be. So the best thing you can do is deliver the value. Don't brag about it. Move on, deliver the value again. That's my best advice on that.
One more question.
Actually,
there's about 3 that kind of center on this issue. How do you say no in the case of small to mid-sized organizations where there may be a limited ability to delegate to others? Take the case of startups where the belief is everyone does everything.
And in some sense, in startups, the rules are a little bit different. If you've got 3 or 4 people I mean, if you're a small startup, it may be that there is no chance to say, no, everyone has to do everything. So if you are in a 3 to 4 person startup, I'll give you some slack. And I've invested in startups. I sort of know that thing. But even so, I would argue that the conversation you should have then is not, should I be saying no to this task when it's given to me, given I'm one of the teeny tiny team? The question you should be asking is, should we as a team say no to this task because it's just not important enough? It just doesn't move the needle. So there, it's not who does the work, but should this work be done in the first place is the question I would have in that small 3 to 4 person team situation. The much more common thing, and I have a slide on that later on, but I'll present it right now. The much more common thing is, hey, I've got nobody below me to delegate. Yes, this is a low value task. Yes, it should be delegated, but I got nobody. Okay, so what do you do there? Well, one thing that doesn't work, and I've seen it not work time after time, is to go to your boss and say, boss, we have too many things to do. We don't have enough people. We got too many tasks. We need more people. I guarantee you that will fail because that will be seen as whining. There's no other way that'll be interpreted. That's not a good rationale. Here's the good rationale. Boss, you have half my time doing things that a junior person can do. Do you really want to pay $60 an hour to do tasks that a $15 an hour person could do? And I can't do the things that only I can do because my time is tied up with these lower value things. Now you're making a value case for adding in a low level person. Actually, most organizations they've gotten too lean, and in particular, too lean on the low end. And so you have middle level people doing low end jobs. And that's a bad use of your time and money. Okay? You should be paying people for the work they can do. You should pay them for their job in the next job, not for doing the job they were promoted out of.
Thank you, Leo. I got one more question, then I'm going to let you go on with your presentation.
Ask away. I love these questions.
Sometimes dipping into the details, as I call it, helps me understand as a leader what problems exist and what needs to be done. Do you have advice for getting out of that practice?
Yeah, actually, I do. One, there's 2 different ways of sort of expressing your mastery of a situation. One is, you know all the details. And if I were to ask you any one of 300 questions, you could answer that. So think of that as, I show mastery by saying, I know a lot of stuff. And it sounds sort of like the question, that's where you're coming from. But there's a different view of showing mastery. And that is, I show mastery by knowing the small number of things that matter. I also know the details, but I'm going to lead the conversation by, think of it as a pyramid and an inverted pyramid. Sometimes people have this inverted pyramid where they start with all the detail and they give you all these facts. And by the time they finish the facts, you've forgotten what the topic was. Okay? That's a bad way to think about your projects. It's a bad way to have conversations with your bosses. Instead, think about a pyramid this way, where you're going to start with, boss, on that investment we talked about, here are the 3 things that really matter. And let's spend our conversation talking about those. If you know enough about a topic to know what really matters and what doesn't, I would argue you know more than just a list of 300 facts about that topic. So I would ask you to invert the pyramid and start thinking about what are the things that really truly matter, that stand out, and what are the things that are more noise and lost in the details. So, some people just love the details and that's how they get up. Fine. If you're a detail person, look at those, but then stop and say, okay, now I really understand what we're doing here. And I understand it enough to know that not everything is equal. I understand it enough to say these 3 things are what's driving it, and everything else, though maybe it's important, isn't going to make a difference. So I think about that. Invert the pyramid. Say mastery is knowing what matters rather than mastery is knowing any fact you can ask me. And this sort of brings us to the golden rule. Anything which can be delegated must be delegated. And that was the one policy of my old consulting firm that I thought was fundamental to our success. In consulting, it's a lot easier because people know, hey, I'm paying this person, and what is he doing? And if it doesn't seem like it's a high value, they're going to stop paying you. So it's very clear. You can't have a person who should be dealing with clients making models in the back room. That's something a lower paid person could do if your client sees these high-paid people on this making spreadsheets, they're going to say, geez, I'm overpaying. I could have gotten cheaper people to do this. That signal you get in consulting and professional services, you don't get that inside the company because they, basically you're all salaried. Everyone gets the same amount. But the rule still holds. Don't think about each time, well, should I delegate, shouldn't I? Should I delegate, shouldn't I? Should I, shouldn't I? That takes too much time. Just go with the golden rule. If it can be delegated, it will. It must. It has to be. If you do that, the work will get done at the right level in the organization. The right work at the right level by the right people.
And Leo, on the slide, another question just came in. What if it is the opposite situation is happening? I work for a startup and they keep expanding my role to include high-level tasks. I like the tasks. I see it as a chance to stretch and grow myself, but I'm not being compensated and working extraordinarily long hours. It was appreciated at first and acknowledged, but now it is expected.
Well, here we get to the payoff on a startup. Are you getting stock that may one day turn, after the IPO, is going to turn into a phenomenal, massive windfall? If so, you have to think of some of that windfall is what you're getting paid today. It's the discounted value of that, which may come 3 years from now. It may not come. You may never get to that IPO. But if you do, it may be 100 times your annual salary. So in part, you say, geez, I'm adding the value, which is great. Are they really perceiving that? Well, maybe so, maybe not. They're not paying me any more than I got paid last year. But that's kind of the rule in startups. You get paid at a relatively low level because you have that either go big or go home if you get the IPO. If you believe you're going to get that payoff, what you might say is, yes, I'm getting paid low today, but I'm going to work 3 years and I'm going to get a massive payday. Everything is fine. So that's part of the package. I'm willing to deal with that. Or you might say, well, geez, I'm not getting appreciated for what I do, and I'm not getting paid for it. And I don't think this is really ever going to go big. There are a lot of startups out there. If you're not appreciated and you don't see an upside of staying, maybe you shift to another startup. Eventually when you look back on your career, you're going to say, did I spend my time doing the work that I loved, that added value and was appreciated? And yes, and you get paid for it. That's also a key, but adding value that you don't get paid for and you don't see that you'll get the payout down the road is really hard to do. So that's sort of my thoughts on that. So how do you decide what should be delegated and what shouldn't be delegated? There's a tool here called the leadership agenda, just above the line, below the line. Think about all the things that you could spend your time on, this project, this set of meetings, all the things you could do, and write each one topic down on a yellow sticky, a Post-it note, and say, okay, for this topic, the expansion into Canada, is that above the line, below the line? If it's above the line, it merits my time and attention. If it's below the line, it should be delegated to someone below me or delayed. Next topic, dealing with this lawsuit, above the line, below the line. You go through all of your yellow stickies, and all of a sudden you have prioritized things above the line, which merit your time and attention, and things below the line, which could be delegated or delayed. So you've made a conscious choice based on value of how to spend your time. Here's an example. This was the CEO's leadership agenda, one of my clients down in New Zealand. They had some above the line items. Should we exit the lightweight paper-coated market worldwide? Huge thing. Above the line, I'm going to spend my time and attention on it. And then a lot of things below the line, some of which were big dollars. It just didn't merit that time and attention. And once you do a leadership agenda, you want to go ahead and tie it into your calendar such that the above the line appear on your weekly and monthly meetings. Below the line aren't allowed on your calendar. So tell your assistant, if someone asks for a meeting on these things, only by exception would they get on my calendar. But if it's above the line item, those are the things I expect my calendar to be filled up with. So when you look back a year from now and said, what percentage of your time was spent on things that could have been delegated or turned out not to matter, that's going to be much lower because you only let things onto your calendar that mattered based on value. This gives you a principal reason to say no to below the line, not because you couldn't help, but because they're just less valuable than the above the line items. Sometimes though, it's hard to let go of these below the line items. One, reach alignment with givens. Make some statements. Okay, I need this by this level of quality by end of Q3. Here's your budget to do it. So those are the givens. They specify what the rules are coming up with this. Define the players and what they want. What are we trying to maximize? What are we willing to trade off with this? And if you're still having trouble, ask yourself these questions. What about this situation requires my unique and specific involvement? Okay, so assume you're not going to get involved unless for some reason you have to be, but if so, what is that reason you have to be? And then ask yourself, why is my team incapable of doing this? Why aren't they trained higher to this level? What have I left out of their training that they can't do this without me? Those are the type of questions that talk about how to build a valuable organization where the right work's getting done at the right level. And you can delegate projects and tasks, but you can't delegate accountability. If you run an effective organization, you have to delegate, but you're still, if things go bad, you're still going to take the heat for it. You can hold your people accountable, but your boss is going to hold you accountable, even if it was the people below you who messed up. So that's part of the game. To get things done, you have to delegate, but that doesn't mean if things go bad, your hands are clean. You know, the buck stops with you. You can't get rid of that. And you have to accept they may do things differently than you would, but for 90% of the time, that's just fine. Yes, it's different, but it does the job. For the other 10%, maybe you need to do some training, some coaching, but for the most part, the fact that they got it done is all that you need. And everyone, if you're going to say no, the work has to get done someplace. So your boss may say no, something below their line that's above your line. Something that's below your line might be above the line of the person who reports to you. So everyone needs to understand how to receive delegation and how to give delegation. Okay, if your boss says no, they may pass that to you. If you say no, you may pass it down. It's a whole sort of cycle, circle of life type of thing. And how do you do that? Well, it's actually very tough to delegate. And are you truly delegating or kind of? And there's a one test, it's Ironclad. If you're truly delegating, it comes off your to-do list and you don't have to check up on it. You have the trust that it's going to get done. They have the skills. Okay? If you're kind of delegating, well, you're not really trusting it's going to get done. You're going to have to double check. You're going to have to do a little micromanaging. And it doesn't come off your to-do list. It still stays on your to-do list because you really don't trust it's going to get done. And it's difficult to delegate because there isn't a sufficient level of trust and confidence. If you delegate, they'll get done to the required level of quality. And here's a terrible question to ask. Can I do it better and faster myself? The answer is almost 100% of the time, yes, you can. And it's a terrible question. It's a terrible question. Of course you can do it better and faster yourself. That's why you got promoted. You've already proven you can do that. But here's the question. Is it a good use of your time to do something which could have been done at a lower level that would have freed up things that only you can do? And how much will your boss be impressed by the fact that you can do your people's work better and faster than they can? I would argue that's not impressing anybody. Other reason it's tough to delegate, the importance for delegation may not be understood. People may not understand how critical it is. May not be clear what should or shouldn't. That's the above the line, below the line. Tendency to micromanage, sometimes it's hard for us to let go. One fear is interesting. It may not be clear if you delegate everything that could be done by others, what if there's nothing left? What if when you delegate, does that mean you have no job left because everything could be done? Okay. What I found is there's always high value things that pop up that you haven't been able to chase because you've been dealing with these low value things. So that idea of if I delegate, will there be anything left? Yes, there will be something left, and it will still take more than 100% of your time.
Leo, quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
Is the inverse situation true as well? If people below you are attempting to do tasks that really should be reserved for your unique capabilities or for your office, should they delegate it up?
Well, you should have this conversation. Let me go back to the leadership agenda. You should have this leadership agenda conversation with your boss. So you do it first for yourself. You lay out what you think is right. Then have it with your boss and say, boss, these are the things I think are above the line and below the line. Your boss may say, well, Leo, this below the line, I think that to me, that's critical. I want you to do that. I want you to take the lead. Great. I'm going to move that above the line. Okay. So it's after you get a first draft, it's an engaged conversation with your boss to make sure you get alignment. And it's an engaged conversation with the people below you. So if I go to this slide, the things that you delegate may be above the line. So have that as a conversation so that you sort of bubble the right work to the right level. If people below you are doing things that they don't really have the capabilities yet that are critical to your success, that's not something that you should delegate. So then you sit down with them and say, hey, this is something that I see as my role. I'd love to have you work jointly with me so I can coach you on how to do it. But this is one of the things you always have the right for the people below you to say, no, that's a task I am reserving for myself. What you don't want are people below you sort of going wild with things strategic that they really shouldn't be trying to deal with. Empowerment without alignment leads to chaos. And if you let the people below just grab anything they want and do anything they want, then you're in a chaotic situation. Then why is it difficult to truly delegate? There isn't anyone below me to whom I can delegate. We talked about that, the value response. Do you want to pay $60 for something that a $15 person could do? And if you think about trust and circle back required, if you have a high level of trust, you don't have to circle back a lot. So you work with someone, you see what they can do. If you have, on the other hand, a C performer, someone who you don't really trust to do the job well, that's a problem. Because you can never, if you delegate them, it never comes off. It's only kind of delegating. It will never come off of your to-do list. And C performers are horrible in an organization, much worse than you think they are. And I'll explain why in just a slide or two. So C performers, you either have to fix them or replace them. You can't just work around them. With this caveat that even people who eventually be stars may deliver C-level performance at the beginning when they're inexperienced or just learning things. So you can't judge too quickly. And maybe they're in A's in some level areas and C's in others. So maybe you have to just give them the stuff that they're good at. But the idea of this C employee, most people haven't thought about the true cost of a C employee. Obviously, they do their own work badly because they're not very good, but that's actually the smallest part of how a C employee hurts an organization. C's block the advancement of more talented people. They don't really get promoted, and all these stars below them, they can't move up because the C's block the way. C's overload your top performers. They scramble to do the work the C was supposed to do. So your A's are overloaded with this dumb stuff that was somebody else's job, but it has to get done. The C's shouldn't do it, should have done it, but they didn't. C's are poor role models and teachers. They don't have the skills, so they can't really develop people with talent below them. C performers hire other C's. They won't hire A's because they don't want to be outshone. So C performers hire other C's. And if you accept continued C performance as a leader, what you're saying is, I have lowered the standards of what's expected in our organization. I'm perfectly willing to accept low-level C performance. And we can see that because Dick has been delivering low-level performance for the last 20 years. He still has a job. Everyone knows Dick is a C performer, and yet I have done nothing about it. So either you as a leader are clueless and don't understand what everyone else knows, or you don't have the guts to make a move that you know is the right thing to do. A couple quotes on C performers. It's incredibly demoralizing for the rest of the team if you don't move poor performers out. And the leader looks blind and out of touch. But it's also not fair to the person who, yes, they're a C performer now, but maybe in a different role or a different organization could be a star. I feel there's no greater disrespect you can do to a person than to let them hang out in a job where they're not respected by their peers, not viewed as successful, and probably losing their self-esteem. To do that under the guise of respect for people is, to me, ridiculous. So this idea of C performer, I want you to think about that. You can probably think of C performers in your organization. What signal does that send? What effect does that have as everyone else tries to work around them rather than fix the problem? We've gone through enough now that you can think about this. Why is it difficult to delegate in your organization? I've given you some of the ideas and concepts. After this session, I'd like you to go through and fill this out. What are some of the specific organization? How do we take the general concepts I've just given you and turn it into specifics in your organization? That's a task to do after this. And saying no requires balancing power and relationships, exercising your power on the one side, tending to your relationships on the other. And if you exercise your power to say no too often, you can damage your relationships. But if you always say yes, that takes away your ability to control your own life and reduces the respect everyone else has for you. I may not like it if you say no, but if you give me a principled reason for doing it that I can understand, at least I'll respect that. If you say yes all the time, even to dumb stuff you shouldn't say yes to, why should I respect you? What happens if you can't say no? You struggle to balance work and other demands on your time because you're totally full and there's more things coming in. You feel angry, overloaded, stressed out, overwhelmed, resentful, disrespected, and underappreciated. Your career stalls as you divert attention from high-value tasks to low-value ones. And paradoxically, the harder you work, the less value people tend to see you as, because you're doing all these low-value tasks. That's what they see you do. They don't see you do the high-value tasks. And it's what they see you do. Remember that example before, the 50,000, 100,000, 200,000. It's a task they see you do, which is how they judge your worth and your contribution to the organization. Here's another good rule. If you're not all in about a new opportunity, just say no. Figure out what's core to you and your identity, what you're passionate about. And this, I love this line. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. If it's a, well, maybe I should, it's a no. Well, if I guess I could, it's a no. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a no. If it's a hell yeah, it's important, you could give an A+, you can get an A+ on it. If it's a, well, maybe, you're not going to get an A+, there are probably better ways to focus and use your time on higher value activities. And Stephen Covey, it's easy to say no when you have a deeper yes burning inside. If you have no deeper yes, if there's no deeper yes, it's hard to say no because you're not saying yes to anything. But if you understand what that yes is, it becomes much easier to say no because it's clear when you say no, you're actually saying yes to this other higher value thing. Mahatma Gandhi, a no uttered from deepest conviction is better and greater than a yes merely uttered to please, or what is worse, to avoid trouble. And that seems like wisdom to me. How to give a positive no. If you have a tough time, there's a good book, Power of Positive No by William Ury, the guy who co-author of Getting to Yes. And a positive no is a yes with an exclamation point. It's a no with a period, and it's a yes with a question mark. The yes with an exclamation point is, yes, I'm doing something important. The no with a period is, no, I'm not going to do this thing you're asking. The yes with a question mark is, well, maybe we can work together sometime in the future. So here's an example. I appreciate you asking me to help out on this, but I'm currently focused on a major effort which I've committed to deliver in the next 2 months. That's my yes with an exclamation point. I'm saying yes to something that matters. Because of this, I'm not taking on additional projects right now. That's a no with a period. But if you'd like my help after this effort's finished, I'd be happy to consider it. Yes with a question mark, not committing, but maybe we'll do it together. Okay. If you have trouble saying no, excellent book to do it. In summary, bringing us to the end, it's a given you'll be busy. But not all activities have the same value. And you want to focus your time and attention on the small number of things that truly matter and which create the most value, both to propel your organization forward and to propel your own career forward as people see you doing your job and the next job rather than your job and the job you already got promoted from. And that brings us to the end. What should be on your leadership agenda? The second exercise after this session I want you to do is to create your leadership agenda for you personally. What's above the line, what's below the line, and for those below the line, how can you stop doing them to free up time so you can focus on what's above the line? That brings us to the end. Jackie, do we have any questions lined up in the queue?
Yes, we do. And let me begin by thanking you, Leo. I learn every time you speak. So thank you so much for a great presentation. Yes, I've got quite a few questions coming through. Here comes the first one. I'm just going to read it. I've brought up several times to people in hiring positions that they are not doing anyone a favor by hiring someone that is not qualified. The answer I get is, but there may be potential and we need someone. I've discussed the devaluing of the position when people not qualified take it and do not have the basic skills to indicate future success, yet unqualified people get hired. Any other arguments I can apply?
I love that question. And people settle way too often. And you're absolutely right. If you hire an unqualified person, everyone will know that. It's not that people are dumb. And they'll realize, hey, that's not a very important role. There's a huge value to holding off for the high value person you don't know yet. And I'll give you an example, which may sound kind of odd, but I've been working a lot with NCAA coaches. I give talks each year at the volleyball Final Four to 200 of the Division I coaches on how to do these things. And one of the main decisions they have is on when to give scholarships to their new athletes coming in. And the problem is they have a scholarship to give this year. They have a marginal player. She's not going to be a star probably, but she's pretty good. And they'll give out a scholarship. And then during the summer, they'll get contacted by an international player who is spectacular, or they'll get a transfer of a star player from another organization, but they gave that scholarship away to the middle-level player who's never going to do anything. They don't think about what is the value of that star who could be coming, even if I haven't seen them yet. So if I'm trying to fill a position and what I have is someone, well, yeah, they can probably do it, I'm going to hold off. I think that's just that's losing the option of getting that star down the road. And the value of those A players is not twice of a B player, maybe 10 times. And the value of a B player may be 100 times the value of a C player. So I'm a big believer that you don't just get someone to fill the role. You say, if it's important, let's get the right person. Even if we don't see them yet, we can go out and find them.
And it's funny because a question that's linked to this just came through as well. Let me turn it inside out a little bit. Our organization has kept our C-level performers around forever. Is there anything I can do as an individual contributor to start addressing the issue? And what can people leaders do?
Well, here's, whenever I have this conversation with clients, I always ask them this: why is it that the longer someone underperforms, the harder it is to get rid of them? That if they were a C performer and they were 3 months in, you could see firing them. But if they're a C performer and have underperformed and taken your money for 20 years and delivered nothing in return, they have job security. I don't understand that. To me, the fundamental concept should not be, okay, I look at Walter and Walter's a C performer. I'm not going to point my finger at Walter. Instead, I'm going to have a conversation with the leadership, and maybe I get the HR folks involved, however I have that, and say, without naming names, we have a number of C performers. It is hurting our organization. It's sending the signal that C performance is acceptable. Is that really what we want as a leadership team? So I would have the conversation at the higher level in terms of what is our philosophy of acceptability of C performance. Once we have that conversation, fine, now let's say, okay, Walter, he's been with us 20 years, and for the last 18, we've paid him more than he's worth. And now you can have that specifics, but you can't have that specifics about Walter before you have the general talk about the philosophy of C performers, because what Walter's going to say is, well, I'm doing just what I did last year, and that was fine. And I did the same thing a year before, and that was fine. Why are you coming down on me now? It must be age discrimination. That must be the issue, not the issue that his performance has been poor for so many years. Finally, yes, he is old, but he should have been dealt with 15 years ago. Okay. So I would start with, what is our philosophy of acceptability of C performance?
Thank you. And I sense this might be somewhat correlated with it. Here's a question. Your golden rule that anything which can be delegated must be delegated seems so black and white. Aren't there tasks you should retain from an accountability standpoint or from a quality deliverable standpoint? If your team doesn't feel like they own those tasks or are accountable for those results, I don't think they put in the same effort I feel those tasks deserve.
Well, actually, I present it consciously as black and white. Anything which can be delegated must be delegated, because I want that to be where you start. Now, I am willing to have conversations. Well, here's something which could be, and oftentimes it comes in the idea of having a hobby. I'm a leader. Here's something I could delegate, but I love doing it, and it relaxes me, and it frees my mind and refreshes me. So maybe you say, okay, I'm going to override the golden rule because for 5% of my time, I get to have hobbies. I get to have things that, yes, it could be delegated, but it's just stuff I love to do. And so I'm willing to have that on the margin. But what I don't want to do is let's start by having, well, I'm going to hold on to everything unless there's a strong reason to delegate it. That's the wrong place to be. Because then you might delegate 10% of the stuff, keep 90%. Instead, I say, I'm going to delegate 100%. But I can be talked out of some of that, so maybe I'll keep 90 and delegate 10. That's what I want, okay? So start with the assumption everything gets delegated. Then, okay, I'm not gonna, there is some gray area, but it's a heck of a lot easier to delegate if you start with that assumption than if you start with the assumption, I can just do it better and quicker and easier myself. Yes, you can, and that's a bad place to think about.
All right, thank you. Another question. I continue to have great reviews and told during my quarterly reviews that I do amazing work. However, I'm not given the recognition within the company, nor am I given a raise that reflects my work or review. How can I change this?
Well, so you've got a couple paths. One is stay inside your organization, continue to do great work, maybe they'll catch on. That seems like that's the path you've been on and hasn't worked. One is try and raise your visibility. Maybe you do great work, but you're not the one who's presenting it. You're not the one who's connecting with the leadership. So maybe you can make your work more visible. The other is, well, maybe you need to make a change, either a different role inside your organization or some other organization. Because at the end of the day, when you're looking back on your career, you're going to say, am I proud of the body of work I did? And did I feel people appreciated and compensated me for what I did? And if you felt I spent 5 years with that organization and I did wonderful things and they just didn't care, at the end of the day, when you get near the end of your career, you're going to look back and say, those weren't the 5 years that really mattered to me. Those weren't the ones that I look back and say, those are the good old days. So I believe if you're doing work that demands respect, you should get it. So might ask yourself, why aren't I getting the respect I deserve? Is it maybe my boss is hogging everything so they never see me get above it? So maybe I need a different boss in a different part of the organization. Or maybe this is the thing I'm doing, it's hugely valuable, but maybe my organization doesn't value it as much as somebody else might. That's the kind of thought I would have.
All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask one more, and here it is. What should I do when the person I'm delegating tasks to begins to say no, and I have no other staff to redirect the task to?
That would be a wonderful situation, because that's saying you're delegating things. Now, are they saying no for the right reasons? Is it a principled no? If it's no because I don't like you, I don't want to do it, that's one thing. But if they can show you a leadership agenda and say, the reason I'm saying no to this new thing you want, boss, is because I said yes to all these other important things. Now, if you think this new thing is more important than these other things that we thought we agreed were important before, fine, tell me which one to take off. But what you can't do is just keep delegating, and adding more things. People aren't going to do a good job. So what you might say is, okay, why is it that you're saying no to this? Is it because you see it as a lower value than your other things? Is it because this is a bad time in your personal life? You just can't take anything on more. And given the situation we're in today, there's a lot of other things you have to deal with. You got to educate your kids at home. I mean, there could be some trade-offs there. So understand why that no is. But if it's a principled no, that might be a wonderful way to say, great, you know what I can do is I can get you a half-time intern to unload some of these things that they could do so that you can accept this new task. And that gets into the value case. Hey, I can get someone cheaper to do some of your stuff so you can do this higher value task. That's the conversation I want to have. And sometimes I may be disappointed. Hey, I want you to do it. You say no. You say no for the right reasons. That's frustrating. But hey, that means your organization is working the way organizations should. You should have some level of frustration. If they always say yes, either they don't have enough stuff to do, which is probably not the case, or they're trying to do too many things and not going to do them with excellence. So I want to have some no, I want to have some frustration. I'd rather have that than always have a yes, but I still don't know if it's actually going to get done to the level of quality we need to win.
Leo, Thank you so much for joining us today on the weekly online learning series here at the University of St. Thomas. In a few days, we'll be sending everyone who attended today's session links to the materials as well as a video recording of the session. I hope you enjoyed the session, and please visit our website. You can see some upcoming courses. Our next online learning session is Thursday, May 7th, Leading Virtually Without Virtually Leading with Allison Smith. I hope we see you then. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have a great day.
Bye. Bye, everyone.